Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you all about the latest album from Gatecreeper, Deserted, out October 4th on Relapse Records. This album has 10 tracks, 40 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. Alright, if you're a fan of that old school throwback Florida style swamp death metal from bands like Obituary, this album is for you. Having said that, this is not a copycat album. This is not Obituary version 2019. It's not that. The roots of this record, as far as the sound, the structure, the overall feel, atmosphere, definitely have a huge presence in that era, that mid 80s to late 80s, even a little bit of the early 90s death metal sound that was coming out of Florida. So definitely that plays a huge role, perhaps the biggest portion of the pie, if you will, as far as sound, structure, and overall feel of the record comes from that era. But they are not done yet. This band is not from Florida, by the way. This band is from Arizona. So I really feel like they're creating their own unique, distinctive style and sound that will fit their own surroundings. And this album has a lot of that Arizona desert ruggedness to it. So while the main portion of the record, in terms of, like I said, sound and structure, perhaps is pulled out of that 80s Florida death metal, there's a lot of that 90s melodic death metal that was coming out of Sweden, bands like At the Gates, for example. But even European style death metal from bands like Cancer, bands like Carcass, there's a lot of those same melodic influence that we saw a lot of death metal bands migrating into that more melodic sound. I see a lot of those same influences in songs on this record, and they're not done yet. So also adding to those two different eras, to those two different generations of death metal bands, they incorporated a little bit of that southern sludge sound to this record, and even a little bit of doom. Not a lot of doom, more sludge, I would say, than doom, but those two, you can definitely pick some influences throughout the tracks as you listen to this record. I even felt that as you listen to the album, you start to notice more of that sludge and doom influences as the album progresses and as you start to get closer to the last tracks on the album. And that takes me to the overall structure of this record. This album has a really cool forward motion, dynamic, fluid structure to the record that just feels like it's morphing with every single track. The album starts off, and how it starts is not how it ends, but there's no abrupt changes, there's no peaks and valleys, there's just a transformation, there's just an evolution as the record progresses. So I really feel as the album is moving along from song to song, the structure of the songs in some cases is similar, but the genres or the influences of the genres that dictated the creation of those songs is different. So even though the structure may be similar to a previous track, the way the track sounds is going to be completely different because it has a different approach, has a different influence. So this allows the album to really morph, to really grow from track to track. So you really feel as you're listening to this album, there is a very slow, gradual process of morphing the songs, allowing the next song to be slightly different from the previous, and so forth and so forth. By the time you get to the last track on the album, if you sit down and you listen to the first track and you listen to the last track, there is an obvious disparity between the two. So that it's perhaps more accentuated that way if you do it from that perspective versus listen to the album in sequence. When you listen to the album in sequence, it's not as noticeable, but there is a morphing, there is an evolution, there is a growth from the first to the last track. I really enjoy that aspect of this record. There is also a perfect symbiosis between the guitars and drums on this album. I really feel that they feed one off the other. When one becomes more melodic, the other one becomes more aggressive, and vice versa. The two are really the 1 and 2 punch on this record. And then vocally, when you add the powerful vocals that you get on track after track after track, you have a really 1, 2, 3 now combination of factors that really dictate the mood, the tempo, the energy, the aggression, the overall sound that this album has to offer. I like the fact that while the drums and guitars morph and change throughout the tracks as we go from the first track to the last track, one thing that stays constant is the vocal approach. The energy in the vocals, the way the vocals come at you, the overall approach from a vocal perspective stays constant throughout the whole record, which allows the album to stay balanced, it allows the album to stay concise, and it allows the changes that are happening from a drums and guitar perspective not to be so so noticeable. It allows them to be a little bit more discreet, and allows the album to not feel completely disconnected from track to track, and still feel still feel like a full pie and not just bits and pieces. This is a great old new school death metal album that really merges a lot of styles, a lot of different approaches, and creates one solid sounding record. I really enjoy this album. I really enjoy that fresh approach, and nothing better than listening to a record and listen to almost the influences track after track, and you can pinpoint the bands that influence those tracks and have a fresh new take on that death metal sound by incorporating so many different ideas, so many different influences into one single record. Really, what a really good job by this band. I really enjoyed this album, and with every single listening experience, every time I went through it, I kind of picked up a different influence here and there. I noticed something different here and there, and it really made me go back to certain tracks and play certain portions of the tracks just to confirm what I was hearing and to make sure that I was listening to it exactly what I was listening and my brain was processing it in the right manner. I really enjoyed this album. Deserted is such a magnificent album, and I really feel like perhaps we'll create a new genre coming out of that part of the United States, out of Arizona, because like I said, this album is very solid, it's very dry, and it's very rugged. That perhaps is the best word to describe the overall sound of this album. As far as tracks are concerned, I want to start off with Puncture Wounds. I really like the underlying guitar riff on this song, is absolutely killer. The drums come in and they have a lot of energy, and when you mix that in with the guitars, it really creates this 1-2 punch that I mentioned earlier. This song really has that dynamic. It really has that killer riff, and then those heavy drums that know exactly when to drop in and drop out as far as heaviness is concerned, to really create that 1-2 kick that this song has all the way through. The song really blends old school death metal with a more modern melodic European style death metal. So I really like that approach, and I like the blend. And I like the way they did it because it didn't do it in a very noticeable way. It's very discreet. The merger between the two is very discreet, and it kind of blends itself in throughout the song without really creating gaps and creating breaks within the track. And that to me is really important to allow the song to have its own fluidity. The more melodic portions without the vocals slow down the song a little bit, making it a little bit more heavy. Adding a little bit a slower tempo, but a little bit of heaviness to it. But I like that. I like those smooth changes in dynamic, those smooth changes in tempo, those smooth changes in velocity. It's something that I really like about this song. But overall, this song immediately spoke to me because of that riff, that guitar riff, that melodic guitar riff that this track has. Every time that it comes into the forefront, every time the vocals drop out, because when the vocals come in, the song changes that momentum. The song becomes a little bit heavier, a little bit more old school, a little bit more dragged down. But when the vocals drop out, it becomes a lot more melodic, and I really like that melody of that riff. It's absolutely contagious and beautiful. Love it. Next, From the Ashes. This is a song that starts off with a great melodic riff. It really has another song that starts off with a great melodic riff, another song that has that European style new melodic death metal, if you will. While the first one, Puncture Wounds, almost had a little bit more of a Carcass Cancer vibe to it, this one has a lot more of an Amon Amarth feel to it. It just has that those energetic melodic death metal riffs that just while being melodic are still heavy at the same time, so they really balance out those two worlds to perfection. This song has kind of that approach to it. It has melody, but the melody is not overpowering, so it's a heavier melody, if you will. But I really like that. I really like how this song has, while still being melodic, has a different melodic approach, has a different influence to it, and so forth, has a different sound. It has an overall, it has a different bite to this track. I really like the fact that they also have a pre-chorus and a chorus that are really well merged together. They really work well together and add a lot of momentum to the track. It allows the song to go from the verses to the chorus without feeling like there's an immediate break, not only from a vocal perspective, but more important, from a sound perspective. You don't want the sound to be abrupt in the change between those two portions of the song, and the way they combine this with the pre-chorus works extremely well, merging that whole piece of the song together. There is a middle bridge on this song with harsh vocals coming in, following by a very menacing guitar melody. Instead of using a solo in that part of the song, which you would almost expect the solo to come in at that point, instead of that, they added this guitar, really dark guitar melody with harsh vocals coming in and out on top of it. And it allowed the song to change the momentum, it allowed the song to feel different without incorporating a solo in that piece. I don't mind, because the way the song is constructed, the dynamic that the song has, I'm okay with that. The guitar melody in that portion to me was more important than the vocals coming in and out, but it works well, and it worked like a nice little bridge that allows the song to then have a melodic piece, but also have this really dark embrace that, following that bridge, builds in towards a more melodic portion of the song, and then the verses, and then obviously the closing portion of the track. I really like this song compared to Puncture Wounds, because while the two have very similar structures, very similar approaches, the style and the melody on the two is very different. One is a more melodic, upbeat feel to it, which is Puncture Wounds. This one is a more dragged down, heavy melody to it. So while using similar elements, they were able to construct two songs with similar structures, but very different and unique sounds to it. Last but not least, Barbaric Pleasures. This track is really cool. Powerful song. This is a really powerful song. It comes at you very relentless. It has power both from the music, from the sound, as well as the vocals. The two elements are really powerful in this track, all the way from the beginning, all the way to the end. The drums can be forgotten in this track, because I really feel the drums play a huge role in that heaviness and that powerful momentum that this track has. Almost sounds, there's portions of this track that the drums sound like the heavens are falling apart, are breaking, and the sky is crumbling. It has that kind of a feel. It is that heavy. It has that kind of a presence as far as the drums are concerned. The drums and guitars play a pivot role in this track, because they also decided to go with a bridge towards the middle end of the song instead of a guitar solo, to really connect the song and allow the song to finish off with a different style. So perhaps where you would be expecting a solo, as I was expecting a solo, you get this really powerful combination of drums, guitars, working together with melody and heaviness, one coming off, the other one coming in. Really cool dynamic that then bridges us off into the chorus that then closes off the track. While I like that piece there, I almost wish they still had added a solo afterwards. Bring that perhaps more in towards the middle of the track. Give a chance for the song to then build back up again. Give it a solo, and then finish it off with a chorus. I just felt that while this song had a lot of heaviness to it, it didn't have as much melody as some of the tracks before and some of the tracks that come after. So one way to add melody without making the song extremely melodic would be to add a guitar solo to this track, to then really bring the song down and really add some, perhaps a dark melody to it, but a melody nevertheless. And by melody, I mean more of like that melodic death metal feel to it. So I really would like to see a solo on this track, but they don't have it, but that's fine. It still works. It's just that I think it would have been a more complete track had they put in a solo, moved that bridge a little bit earlier, and then put in a solo after. But overall, it's a great track. It's much different from the previous two. It's a much heavier, a more powerful, more robust song that has some moments of the song, specifically that powerful drum guitar bridge there almost feels a little bit sludgy. There's some sludge elements into this song for sure. And as you start to move down the album, as I said earlier, you start to pick up more and more of those elements as the album progresses. Alright guys, this is it. This is Gatecreeper, Deserted, out October 4th on Relapse Records. Really strong, like I said earlier, really strong new wave throwback death metal album from this band out of Arizona. Rugged death metal, that's what I'm going. Deserted, to use the name of the title, Deserted death metal is what this album sounds like. Very rugged, very raw, very rough around the edges. I really enjoy the mixture of genres, the mixture of different eras of death metal, inclusion of other genres outside of death metal to really make this album very robust sound-wise. Then using the vocals as the main consistent focal point throughout the album to really build a bridge between track and track and track while they're morphing and changing from the first all the way to the last. Great record from Gatecreeper, out October 4th. Now let me know your thoughts on the album, on the band. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.